Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for our 17th episode this week, where we will be breaking down last Saturday's game versus the Colts, discuss news around the NFL, and preview this upcoming rematch versus the Bills on Sunday afternoon. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So, Kevin, I guess we have to start off with the big matchup Saturday night. Game versus the Colts. What was your biggest takeaway from that game?
I think the biggest takeaway was we were kind of looking to this game to see what are the Patriots really going to look like. And I don't think we really got a good kind of picture of this because the Patriots came out very flat. They were very undisciplined. They kind of looked like the Patriots, the 2-4 Patriots versus the 7-win streak Patriots. I think they played very sloppy. They didn't look well for, I think, the first 2 to 3 quarters of the game. And I think judging off of this game, there's not much you could really tell of how this team is fully. I think one thing you could get worried about is how are they going to play in big games and away games. But I don't think I think that's more of an aberration. I don't think it's something that's going to continue. But the biggest take was how sloppy they looked. They did not look good at all.
Yeah, that was my exact thought as well. Is not only were they, it just seemed like everything was going wrong for everyone. It didn't seem like anyone had a great game. Usually, like sometimes if someone has a bad game, then other people make up for it. But it seemed like everyone was having an off day where there were just so many penalties and just like pre-snap penalties. There were Jamie Collins, for instance, a few weeks ago, or maybe like 5-6 weeks ago, he had the interception, which was like the fastest interception where he caught it like less than half a second after it was thrown. This time the ball was in his hands, which could have been a pick six. He drops it. JC Jackson drops. It was a tough catch, but we've seen him make tougher catches for another interception. The block punt, just everything just seemed like in the past 7 weeks, the ball, or it would have gone the Patriots' favor, but it just seemed like every single thing this time was just not going in their favor. I don't know if it was just the bye, them being a little rusty, especially with the new bye rules where before you used to be able to practice during the bye. Now you have to have at least 4 days off. And then since they had the Monday game, the previous week, they pretty much didn't practice at all the first week of the bye. So I don't know if that had something to do with it or not, but I didn't think the loss was too concerning because it's things that we haven't seen the Patriots do. It's been more mental mistakes. It wasn't them really losing on technique. So I thought that was at least good, but overall it was just sloppy play. Like you said, what we saw the first 6 weeks of the season, uncharacteristic penalties, uncharacteristic mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you saw these teams in a rematch going forward, I think they would slaughter the Colts again.
I agree.
I think Wentz looked a lot worse than we'll get really into him a little bit later on, but he looked a lot worse than I was expecting him to look. He looked horrible.
Yeah, he did.
And I actually think they threw too much. So, kind of going into the game, what did you think of Mac? And I know this is it was kind of a tale of two different halves. So what were your big thoughts on him?
It was tough to read. I thought the first quarter and a half, he wasn't bad. It's just the Patriots overall was sloppy and mixed with the defense being pretty fast that his stats at least look pretty good. I think it was something like 8 of 11 or where he wasn't throwing too many too many incompletions. He was throwing the ball where he needed to, a couple of drops here and there, but I didn't think he was bad. But then I'd say from halfway through the second quarter until the fourth quarter was probably the worst we've seen him all year. Before he even threw the first pick, I noticed he seemed a little like flustered.
Yeah,
it looked like he was sweating a lot. And I don't think I texted you, but I was going to text you saying, I wonder if the Colts have the heat on because it seemed like he was sweating profusely compared to what he normally did. So I don't know if it was just something like that, but he just seemed flustered. But like I said, from about halfway through the second quarter until about the fourth quarter, it was probably the worst we've seen him. But I was really impressed with how he handled himself in the fourth quarter. Him leading the Patriots back where they had a potential chance to win. So I thought it was pretty much a tale of you saw essentially two different performances from Mac in this game.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit on everything. I think Mac looked really bad at some points in this game. He looked really good at some points. That first pick, I don't fully put on him, but because you got to think the defense gets paid to make plays too, and I think he really did a good job baiting him into it. I think still he should have realized that he was there and lost kind of awareness of where he was. And then the second pick was all on Mac, where it was a great play by the linebacker to make that dive and catch, but everyone knew where he was going with that. Everyone knew where he was going to go, when he was going to go. And I don't think there was any surprise for that. So I think that was more of him just not realizing what was going to happen there.
I think the one thing I would say though is I think the first one is a little more on Mac, where it is unfair because we're judging him like a normal quarterback where he's a rookie, and it was just he should have seen it, but he just didn't see the guy. But the linebacker did pretty much bait him into it. But the second one, I don't blame him for the decision to throw that way. It was a hell of a catch by the person that intercepted. I'm just blanking on the name right now, but he could have thrown the ball a little better too.
He could have thrown harder too. He didn't put really any gas into that throw, and that was the big reason why too it was picked. Whereas if that was like a line drive throw, it probably would have ended up tipping it because that would have been a really hard kind of diving catch to make. And I think really I did like and we kind of talked about this last week about what are we going to see from him. Can he lead a comeback, which we've kind of seen he mostly can based on the Texans, the Bucks games. He's never completed. He completed one of the Texans. He didn't with the Bucks.
Cowboys too.
Cowboys too. In this game too, I think he was just one defensive stop away from coming back in this game. And he showed a lot of poise on there. He showed a lot of guts, a lot of grit. It was that play where he did exactly what you're not supposed to do and throw across his body, kind of like a Derek Jeter type of throw, and ended up completing it and got killed on that play and was still able to kind of come back, knock that off. And he looked hobbled, but played really well with that. So that's one thing that's a good takeaway from that. So, and it's something we've always known. He's got the drive. We know he's got the great. He's not like a Jimmy Garoppolo, except Jimmy's playing really well right now.
But even Mac, there were times where he was blocking, where he was trying to push the pile, where it just shows that he's going all out, which is something, granted, might not be the smartest thing, but you have to appreciate his hustle and his desire to win. Yeah.
Now looking forward against how the defense played, without that 67-yard run, I think they only gave up 100. Low hundreds for rushing yards besides that one large run.
I think it was about 100, like 5 to Taylor, but I think it was like 160 overall to the Colts.
What was your kind of thoughts on how the defense played? How do you think they did overall?
I thought the second drive was similar to the drive against the Browns, where the Browns just ran it down their throats, and the first drive of the game, and they couldn't stop them. It looked like they were just getting pushed around. After that, they didn't play that bad. I know this. If you look at the score, I think, what was it? 20-10 was the final score, or no, 27-17. Yeah, 27-17 was the final score. So if you look at that, you think that they didn't play great, but I think they held the Colts to 2 and 8 on third downs. It was just pretty much that one drive and then that long touchdown run. And then after that, they pretty much clamped down. It wasn't great, but they held their own when they needed to. We saw more of the bend, don't break. I think it was the third drive they had where they were marching down the field, but once they got inside the 30, then they pretty much stopped them again. Yeah.
And then you got to remember too, you could take away those two special teams mistakes. And that's 10 points there. So instead of 27, that's 17. So those are two huge kind of key difference makers in this game. And I think the defense played all right. Except this was another instance where when you have to have it, they didn't. And we've seen that a few times with them. We saw it with the Saints. We saw it with the Cowboys. We've seen it a few times this year, and it's just something that's a little concerning. And it's just hopefully, but you also got to think Jonathan Taylor is probably the best running back in the league right now. So
and I don't even have an issue with them giving up the 70-yard touchdown, because I was texting you at the time. I thought it was stupid of him to, once he got the first down, the game was over. So I don't know if part of it was Bill saying if he gets a first down, then just let him get a touchdown or try and force a fumble or something like that.
Well, I think that's why they loaded the box completely. So that way, if he does get the first down anyway, it's not going to matter. So
yeah, because the Patriots were out of timeouts. It was going to go into the 2-minute warning. So if he got the first down and just kneeled down, the Patriots don't get the ball back and the game's over. By him getting the touchdown, granted, the Patriots don't have any timeouts, but they got the ball back with 2:01 left on the clock. So you get a quick touchdown, get an onside kick, which we saw for the previous week. It's going to be tough, but it's realistic that they could have come back and tied the game or even won it.
Yeah.
So I don't have an issue with them giving up that long touchdown. I have an issue with them giving up the first down.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing that I wanted to talk about with the defense and something I'll let you kind of describe what you saw, because you're the one that kind of pointed this out, and I thought it was interesting. What did you see about the coaching staff going down?
Yeah, so I noticed this on the broadcast, and I texted you because I wasn't sure if I was the only one that saw it. I was like, that can't be. But I think there was 3 or 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and coming out of a commercial break, the broadcast showed the Patriots sideline, and it showed Bill Belichick talking to the entire defense in a huddle. What I noticed was not only was Bill Belichick talking to the defense, which I don't have an issue with, because usually in key situation, Bill has always done that over the last 20 years. The thing that struck me the most was Steve Belichick was not only not inside the huddle along with all the other players and coaches, he was off to the side and looking sort of disengaged. And I thought it was very strange. I would understand if Bill was talking to the whole defense and he was in there, but he was just off to the side, and the broadcast showed it for about 12, 13 seconds. And the entire time he was just either looking at his iPad or just looking down or walking in like circles. So I don't know if like him and Bill had a disagreement of how to handle the defense or what it was, but I just thought it was a very striking moment. Very strange.
Yeah, I think it kind of really shows who's really in charge of this defense. We've said it before, ever since the Cowboys game, Bill's taken a much bigger role in this. And it just clearly shows that even though Steve's the one calling out the plays, Bill's got a very big hand in this.
And then even with that, the other thing that I just thought was strange was Gerard Mayer was also in the huddle too. But so I'd understand if like Steve and Gerard were in it, but Gerard was in it and then Steve wasn't. So just something interesting just to keep focused on looking for going forward.
Yeah. And then it would be another thing too if no coaches were in the huddle, but having a few of them in there and not Steve, it kind of was a little question mark. Looking at the Colts, I think the two biggest kind of things to focus on would be Wentz and Taylor. Kind of two different stories about how their team is. I think Taylor showed why he's a dominant back, why he leads this team, and why they're actually doing well this year. Whereas Wentz, I don't know. This is like the Titans game in 2019 where they came in here and I think they threw it probably around 12 times, I think.
72 total yards.
And I remember coming out of that game saying they threw it too much. I think the same thing happened with Wentz. I think Wentz was horrible in this game. The first 3 plays, the way he threw were bad. He could have had 3 interceptions in this game. They dropped 2 of them. He just did not look good. And it kind of showed I've never really been that high in him just because something doesn't seem right with him. He doesn't seem like a winner. And I think if he was still on the Eagles team from a few years ago, they would have made the Super Bowl. I think he's just a mistake waiting to happen. And I don't think Frank Reich has any trust in him at all. And you could clearly show it by how much they ran. And I think they actually didn't run enough. But I just think that he's going to be kind of the downfall to their team going forward.
No, I agree. I think he's similar. He reminds me a lot of Ryan Tannehill when he was with the Titans, where you pretty much have a quarterback that you're hoping just doesn't make the mistake. He's going to be more of a game manager where hopefully you throw it 15, 20 times, 150, 200 yards if you're lucky, and he doesn't have an interception and you'll be happy with that. I think that's sort of how I'm viewing it. And this Colts team does remind me a lot of that Titans team from 2019, where Jonathan Taylor is sort of like that Derrick Henry from that year.
Yeah. And it's just something crazy if you think about it. Can you guess what his cap hit is for this year?
I think it's something like 50 or 60 million.
Oh no, not that much.
Or was that the dead cap for the Eagles? Okay.
$21 million 28 next year, 26 the year afterwards. They can actually get out underneath them after 2022. But the dead cap for this year would be 35 million. Dead cap for the next year is 15 million, and then it's zero for his last 2 years of his deal. But it's just insane how much money is guaranteed for him, and how I don't think how good he's not that good.
But I guess it's similar with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is getting about 30 million a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
I was gonna ask one thing, but yeah, I think one thing that just kind of struck me was this game sort of reminded me, or the entire Colts team after it, along with the Colts, how it sort of seemed like this was their Super Bowl, where they gave everything into this game, where I feel like they're playing the Cardinals next week. Cardinals are coming off two losses in a row, but I feel like the Cardinals are going to kick their ass next week because the Colts aren't going to be fully prepared for the game, where they put so much into this game, and it's going to take them by surprise and maybe even knock them out of the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely see that happen. I also don't think the Cardinals are that good. I think
I agree.
Overrated, and I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is that good of a coach. But I think you're not going to lose 3 in a row, I don't think, with that team, with the talent they have. I don't think the Colts are that good. And I think another thing to just think of, like you said, they were playing this team like it's the Super Bowl, kind of how we've seen this a lot. The Jaguars a few years ago. There was
the Titans even a few years ago, like the 2018. The 2018 season especially just comes to mind because the Patriots lost to 5 teams that didn't make the playoffs, where they lost, and then the following week all those teams lost because they put so much into this game.
So I think that's one thing to think of. And then just the other thing, what was I going to say? I'm blanking on it now. The odds that if this team was to go and win the Super Bowl, the odds that they're going to win 14 in a row is highly unlikely. So they, not to say this is a good loss, but it can put things in perspective for them. And also, realistically, you're not going to win that many games in a row. The last team to do it was the Patriots in 2003, and then the team to do that, to win even more than 12 in a row before then, was the 86 Giants. So I don't think this team is on those
86
levels.
Bears. 86 Bears won in 86.
Whatever the Giants was in the 80s. I don't remember
88?
the year. Maybe 88. But I don't think this team is on the par of either of those teams. And they don't have enough talent to be doing that. So I think not to say this was a good loss, but it was going to have to happen eventually. You're not going to win that many in a row. It's just not. It's probably not going to happen. So the fact that it happened here, it's going to kind of kick them back into gear, get ready for Buffalo. I think it may help a little bit.
Yeah, and the encouraging thing was it's not like they got absolutely blown out like the Bills lost 43-7, where they were just humiliated. A lot of it was just mental mistakes. It was simple. It wasn't like they were losing on technique. It was just mental mistakes, or the ball just not going their way. Yeah, where it's something that you can easily correct. If Michael Owen doesn't have that false start on third and goal from the 2-yard line, I think they score. I think they get the touchdown there, or if they don't get it, they go for it on 4th down and they get the touchdown. If the missed field goal, they don't jump off sides. That's 3 points off the board. If they just block on the punt, that's 7 points off the board. So it was a lot of things that you typically don't see from this Patriots team. We saw it earlier in the year in games where they lost, the Cowboys game, the Bucs game. But it's not something we traditionally see from a Bill Belichick team, especially this late in the season. Yep. So that's at least something I thought was encouraging, along with them fighting back where they were down 20-0 going into the 4th quarter, and they almost won. Yeah, agreed. So I think that's a good kind of key just to realize, where it wasn't like they were out. Well, they were outplayed based on their execution, but they weren't out. It wasn't like a lack of talent or a lack of ability that they lost. Exactly. It was a lack of execution. So that's a good thing to go forward with. I just want to say one thing on the penalties, which just struck me, was Patriots had 8 penalties. 3 of them were false starts inside the red zone. 4 of their total penalties came inside the red zone. And then in addition to those 4, there was that offsides on that missed field goal. So 5 of their 8 penalties were in really key situations, which really just handicapped them throughout the entire game. Exactly. Who would be your 3 up from the game? I'll go with my 3 up, and then you can go your 3
Yep.
up, and then your 3 down. My 3 up, Hunter Henry,
Yep.
number 1. Number 2, I'm going Nikhil Harry / Nelson Aguilar, and then number 3 is Mac in the fourth quarter. So Hunter Henry, just getting numbers. He was 6 catches, 77 yards, 2 touchdowns. Mac targeted him again in the red zone where there was an interception, but overall, he was your most dependable player. You could argue he was your best player on the entire team Sunday or Saturday. He was just dependable. And he's just someone that you can target in the red zone where he's probably going to come down with it. I think he has 9 touchdowns this season, which is outside of Gronk is the most by a tight end in Patriots history. I think Gronk has 5 or 6 more seasons with more than that, but he's shown that he's taking over that tight end role that we've seen from Gronk and then Martellus Bennett from the last 5-6 seasons. Number 2, Nikhil Harry and Aguilar. I put them combined because they both made really good catches, really contested catches, and they also were running good routes where they were beating their defenders. It's just Mac didn't have enough time to throw it. There was the one where they highlighted during the broadcast, the botched flea flicker, where if Mac had enough time, Nikhil Harry was wide open for a touchdown. There was another time where Nelson Aguilar beat his guy and was wide open for probably a long touchdown, but Mac just didn't have enough time to throw it. And then they both had really tough contested catches. It's unfortunate they both got knocked out by head injuries, but they both were playing really well. And Nikhil Harry's catch, the 40-something yard catch, is essentially why the Patriots drafted him for play like that. And it was encouraging that he had his best game of the season, and it's hopefully something that he can build on. The head injury knocking him out was a little wasn't great, but he's back at practice already today, so it looks like it might have not been a concussion, which is at least good. So hopefully it's something he can build on. And then Mac, his play in the fourth quarter, after having probably his worst performance of the season, to come back and lead them to possibly winning the game was just impressive.
Exactly. I think mine is a little different than yours for 3 up. I'd say Hunter Henry, number 1. I don't really have much to add. He did really well in this game. There was one play where I wasn't too fond of. It was that 4th and 1 where he just didn't get his head around. And he does that a lot. And so does Jacoby Myers, where they take a while to kind of get open or to get ready for the ball. And Myers is probably just because of lack of talent of being able to get open. So he's got to do a lot of moves and shifts to try and get himself open. And Henry is kind of the same thing. He does too much stuff to try and get open, where I think he's got a little bit more, he's got more talent than Myers does. And I think it's really good up the seam, but some of those quick plays, he's not turning his head around quick enough. Adrian Phillips was my next one. I think he was really pivotal in the run game. I think they started bringing him down a little bit. I think he played really well in this game. It's good that he is back for them. And then my third one was I'm blanking on Jamie Collins. I think the run defense got a lot better when he came in once Duggar and Bentley were out of the game. And I think them playing more base defense and not that kind of big nickel really kind of show up their run defense a lot. And I think Collins had his highest snap count of the year and actually played really well, other than kind of dropping that pick 6. But what you going to do there? 3 down. I would say number 1, special teams overall was horrible. The block punt is inexcusable. You had 3 in the year, and that's the most of any team in the NFL this year. There was that offsides on the punt on the kick, which ended up making them score another 3 points. And then I think Jake Bailey had some bad punts too.
Yeah.
He just hasn't looked well at all this year, and some things definitely have to be up with him because he's just not the same punter that he was before. Number 2 is Isaiah Lewis. He was awful. He was terrible. There was that running into Stevenson. There was all the penalties. There was the sacks that he was just, I just can't even fathom how he was just bad. He was really bad. And we've seen that from him this year. We've seen either really bad games from him. We've seen really good games. We've seen some games, but he was not good in this game. And I think the more and more we see him, I think the more and more they might be regretting kind of picking up that option. It's because that's $10 million next year. And then the last player that I was down on was, oh, why am I get it right? I keep it in my phone. 1 second. Oh, the defensive line. I think they got pushed around a lot by the Colts offensive line. And I think that was one of the kind of things in the run game which helped the Colts out, where they were kind of manhandling a little bit up front. So those are my three down.
Yeah, I have pretty much almost exactly the same. My number one is Isaiah Owen. Pretty much what you were saying, where he was just getting beat just by the defensive line whenever he was blocking. In the pass game and the run game, he was just getting turned around, too many penalties. Like you said, he's just been so inconsistent this year. The first 5-6 weeks of the season, he was pretty horrible. And then he turned it around pretty well, where he's been playing well the last 6, 7, 8 weeks of the year. But this was one of his worst performances in a key situation. Not much more to add to that. Number two, like you said, special teams, the block punt, their third block punt of the year. The offside, and then Jake Bailey, like you said, he only had 2 punts, but one of them was 34 yards, and then the other was 46 yards. And there has to be some injury, or if there is no injury, I think that's even more concerning. That if there's an injury, you can at least look to it. Oh, that's why he's not performing well next year. Once he heals, he'll be back. But if it's not that, I don't know what the heck it is. And then even some of the kickoffs, the squib, I think they tried like the squib kick, or like the pooch kick.
That wasn't him. That was Folk.
Yeah, that was Nick Folk. I was just going into the next one of why special teams was bad, where they had the pooch kick, but it ended up going they brought it back to the 30-yard line.
Yeah.
So granted, I know Nick Folk usually doesn't do the kickoffs. I don't know if he was brought in specifically for that, or if there is that thing nagging Bailey, but just not great. And then number 3, I'm just going with both offensive and defensive lines. They just look like both of them were being manhandled by the Colts. Patriots offensive line was being manhandled by the Colts defensive line. Patriots defensive line was being manhandled by the Colts offensive line. It was sort of a little inverse of the Bills game a few weeks ago, where the Patriots, both sides of the ball, or on the trenches, both sides were just manhandling the Bills, and they kind of got a taste of their own medicine this week.
Yep. Yeah, I don't really have much to add for that. I think we kind of see eye to eye on that. I think you had some questions that you wanted to go over.
Yeah, I got 2. I'll go with my first one.
Yep.
I have it in reverse, but if you were AP writer and you had a vote for Defensive Player of the Year, and you were voting for a Patriots player for the NFL Defensive Player of the Year, would you be giving it to Matthew Judon or JC Jackson?
JC Jackson. Actually, no, I'm going to change that around. Matthew Judon. And the stipulation is if he continues to play how he did the previous, excluding these last 3 games. I think he's been he hasn't had his best 3 games, the last 3 games. Granted, they didn't really throw too much this game. But I think he's not the greatest run blocker. He was kind of wasn't sealing the edge that well this last game. I'm hoping it's just a little injury or something like that. But I think for this team to get anywhere, they need a pass rush, because zone defense can't be played without one. So I would say if the defense continues to play well, it's because they're getting pass rush, and that would be from Matthew Judon. So that would be my explanation.
So the reason why I asked is I think it is a good question, because both have been playing really well this year.
Yeah.
And the first 10, 11 weeks of the season, I was saying Matthew Judon should be Defensive Player of the Year in the running at least. I think just how well JC Jackson has been playing the last 8 weeks, I would put it that I think Matthew Judon is the Patriots defensive MVP, but I think JC Jackson should be in the running over him for NFL's Defensive Player of the Year. Just some stats I found interesting was Gilmore in 2019, when he won Defensive Player of the Year, QBs were completing 50% of their passes when targeting him, and they had a 44 passer rating against. JC Jackson this year, QBs are completing 44%, so less against him, and then they have a passer rating of 29. He has 7 interceptions, and he's pretty much just locking down whoever he's been covering the last 7, 8, 9 weeks of the season. I know he was inconsistent the first 6, 7 weeks of the year, and I was pretty hard on him of his play because he wasn't playing like a number 1 corner, but he's just been shutting down whoever he's had to guard. We'll have to see next or this upcoming week against Stephon Diggs. I think that's going to be a really big test. But I think so far I'd go with Jackson over him. And then second question is, with 3 weeks to go in the NFL, who would you vote for MVP? And then just all the major categories: offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, rookie of the year on both sides, and then coach of the year.
All right. I didn't get this question until right beforehand, so I haven't had much time to think about this. I think MVP, I would go with. It's tough. I would say probably right now Aaron Rodgers, even though I hate him. Offensive player of the year. I really don't know the answer on this one because I don't know. Actually, no, I do. It's Cooper Kupp of the Rams. Defensive player of the year, Micah Parsons. Offensive rookie of the year, Mac Jones. Defensive rookie of the year, Micah Parsons. And coach of the year, Bill Belichick. Those would be all mine.
Yeah, I think those are all respectable answers. For me, MVP, I'd be going Brady over Rodgers. I just think the season he's having, you could argue this is one of his best seasons of his career, and he's doing it at 44. And then I know the Bucs are a super team, but they've only played, I believe, 2 games the entire year with all 4 of their key players of Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Gronk. They've only played 2 games of the season with all of them. So I know if you take one of them out or 2 of them out, it's still, you could argue, a super team or super offense, but he's just been having a absolutely great year. Offensive player of the year, it's tough between Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor. I think I'd slightly lean Jonathan Taylor, but I think you could argue either one. Defensive player of the year, I'd have to go with Micah Parsons. Offensive rookie of the year, Mac. Defensive rookie of the year, obviously Micah Parsons. And then coach of the year, Bill. So just wanted to see what your thoughts were with 3 games left.
Yeah. I think just with the MVP, my answer would change based on how these 3 weeks go with how Brady does missing all these pieces around him. If he wins handily of these next 3 games, then I would shift it to Brady. I think just Rodgers has had a really good year statistically and really all of the measures too. So I hate him, but I would have to put him there. News around the NFL AFC, if we want to just do this really quick. Chiefs Chargers. What were your thoughts on kind of the biggest thing out of it was Staley's going for it so much? What were your thoughts? I'll give mine first. I actually agreed with him. I think going into this, that the Chiefs, and especially so at the end, can put up points really when they want. I know this isn't the same Chiefs team as it was last year or the year before. Mahomes doesn't look right still. There's something got to be wrong with him because his timing and his throws aren't in sync. But the threat that they have and how poor the Chargers defense is, I would go with any route to try and get as many points as they were. I know you could second guess and say, oh, they lost 9 points on the game, but number one, their kickers aren't that good. Number two, except those are pretty short field goals. But number two, you need to put points up against the Chiefs. The only one I do kind of second guess was that first one was 4th and 5 on the goal line. That's a pretty hard one to convert. So that one I could maybe say kicking. But again, would have changed the whole complexion of the game. It might have. So what were your thoughts?
No, I agree entirely. Where I had an issue with the first one. I thought it was too long. If it was like 4th and at the 1 or 2 yard line, like some of the other ones, I would have gone for it. But 4th and 5, that's a tough one to convert. So I would have kicked that one. But the other 2, I don't have an issue with. I texted you this after the game, and I was thinking it the entire 3rd quarter and 4th quarter too, where the Chargers just showed that even though they have a new coach, they have Justin Herbert, new quarterback, compared to the old Chargers, they're pretty much still the same Chargers where they're going to, in big games, they're going to find a way to lose the game. And that's pretty much what they did. Going into this game, you knew that Patrick Mahomes is not good in the pocket. He pretty much has his bread and butter is when he runs outside the pocket and throws on the run. What do? They kept rushing up allowing Patrick Mahomes, instead of throwing in the pocket, to leave the pocket. So you knew that going into the game, and then they just didn't plan for that as well. Second thing you knew was the Chiefs' entire offense runs through Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. So you have to pretty much lock them down and let everyone else beat you. What do? They allow Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill to combine for 320 plus receiving yards. So, and then even that touchdown to win the game in overtime, Travis Kelce had 3 people surrounding him when he caught it around the 25 yard line. He went untouched into the end zone. So first of all, they were allowing him free releases where he's a very soft player, especially for a tight end, where if you jam him, it knocks him off his game. They weren't doing that at all. They were allowing free releases. But B, when he actually caught the ball to end the game, they weren't even close to even tackling him. It was just showing that, I know the Chargers have talent, but it seems like they just, I don't know what it is. Different city, different coach, different quarterback. They just always just find a way to lose those big games.
Yep. And then speaking of losers, the Ravens, the Titans lost this week as well. Yep. Titans mistake after mistake, fumble, turnovers, again shows that they really need why am I blanking on his name? Derrick Henry, not Hunter Henry. They need Derrick Henry. And the Ravens, what do you think of them going for the 2-point conversion to end the game? I think we were kind of hoping they were, because we didn't think they were going to convert again. What were your thoughts?
So I'll talk about the Titans first, and I think they're showing that without Derrick Henry, they're just a completely different team. They still are a good coach. They have a good coach, so they'll find a way to be competitive. But unless Derrick Henry comes back 100%, which is tough to do coming back from a foot injury, I don't think they're going to be able to really give much competition in the playoffs. So that's just my thought on them. And it's good that they lost, because even with the Patriots losing, it allows them to still possibly have a shot at that number 1 seed, have that bye in the first round. The Ravens, I didn't have an issue with them going for 2. Against the Steelers, I kind of did, because I understood why they went for 2, but I didn't agree with it. This time I completely agreed with it. You're going up against Aaron Rodgers. He still had 30-something seconds left in the game where he could go for it and kick the field goal to win the game. But also, you're playing with a backup quarterback against the Packers, where I think John Harbaugh pretty knew it was kind of lucky that they were in that situation where they were able to possibly bring the game into overtime. I think he felt that if it was to go into overtime, either A, his defense wasn't going to be able to stop Aaron Rodgers, or B, if they got the ball first, that they weren't going to be able to get a touchdown. The Ravens secondary is pretty depleted too, which I think that had to factor into it as well. So I think he knew, this is my best shot of winning the game. So go for 2 here. If we don't get it, we're going to probably lose. If we get it, that's great. If we don't get it, we probably would have lost anyway.
That's a fair point. Looking forward to the Bills this week. I'm going to do a quick preview. It's kind of a rematch. The weather right now looks to be semi-decent. I think 30s. I don't think any wind and rain yet. So it should be a pretty even match weather-wise. I do expect them to be coming in here gung-ho, and that may be to their detriment. Because we know that Mcdermott can kind of get a little riled up a little bit too easily and lose his head. And the amount of importance on this game may just make him lose his mind. And I think with the Patriots loss against the Colts, I think it's really going to jolt them into being more focused and making sure that they kind of win this game. We previewed only a couple weeks ago the difference between the offense and the defense. I don't think there's really much to go over. What are your key kind of impacts for this game? What are you looking for? What do you think the Patriots need to do in order to win?
I think they have to control the trenches on both sides of the ball, like they did last time, where if they're able to control or beat the Bills offensive line, preventing them from running the ball, and even just pass rushing too, I think that's going to help them and set the tone for the defense. And then offense, if you're manhandling the Bills defensive line like you were last time, you're able to run the ball. And then if you're running the ball effectively, you're allowing Mac to pass. You bring in the play action, keep them. You're not playing one-dimensional, and you're keeping the Bills second guessing what you're going to do. You could pass, you could run, and then it pretty much puts the ball in your favor. I think a key is when the Patriots played the Bills a couple weeks ago, Josh Allen didn't really run that much. I think a key thing is keeping containment, not rushing too far past when you're rushing the quarterback and making him throw from the pocket, not scrambling in like a third down situation, not trying to go all out for the sack where he can run for a first down or run for 20 yards. And then that's usually a killer for a defense. So I think that's big. The Bills are going to be without Cole Beasley. So I think that's a big loss for them. They still have some good receivers and Stephon Diggs and then Emmanuel Sanders, even though it's not the same Emmanuel Sanders from before, he's still been pretty productive this year. And then Dawson Knox is a pretty good tight end. So I think if you're able to limit the Bills' running attack and then force Josh Allen to throw and force him to throw from the pocket, I think that's going to really put the Patriots in a good position to win. Speaking about Sean McDermott, I agree entirely with what you were saying, where I think considering how he completely outcoached last game, I think he's going to overdo it coming into this game. And then I think it's just going to be a key detriment to him.
Yep, I completely agree with everything. I think containing the edge is the biggest thing against Allen, especially on that right side of the line. So that way he's best when he's rolling out to the right. If you make him roll out to the left, he's not as good. And just making sure that he's not able to run away and run for as many yards as he did against the Bucs. He's got to get himself killed eventually, but he's really effective in that. And I think kind of getting enough pressure on him where he loses sight of what's going on downfield, because we did see there's a few times where if you do blitz him or do rush him, he doesn't keep his eyes downfield and he does lose kind of sight of what's going on. So that's kind of a big impact there. Patriots.
That's a good point that I just want to add on to is I believe when he was blitzed last game or when he was under pressure, he was 0 for 7 with 2 sacks. Yeah. And then one thing I noticed against the Bills, especially second half of the game, is traditionally Matthew Judon is on the left side going up against the right tackle, but we saw a lot more of Kyle Van Noy on that side. So I wonder if that's more because Matthew Judon sometimes might break containment, allowing him to run, and they trust Kyle Van Noy more in that situation, or if they're going to do a little bit of mixing and matching of swapping them up just to keep Josh Allen little off center and not entirely focusing in on that.
Yeah, it's a big thing to look for, and I think Van Noy did a really good job at containing that edge in that game. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to do it again, or if he's given the opportunity to do it again.
Yeah.
Patriots favored by 2.5 points right now, over under 43.5. I have them winning this one pretty handily. I think based on just how that Colts game was, I think McDermott's going to lose his mind. I think they're going to have a big penalty at one point that's going to make them get into scoring position. And there's probably going to be a Josh Allen interception. So I have him at 31-17, but it could be very close. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I keep going back and forth on this. I'm going to stick with what I said after the first game, that I think the Patriots blow them out. I think especially after everything Sean McDermott did during the game, what he said after the game, I think Bill's not going to forget that. And if he has a shot to run up the score, I think he's going to. I think Patriots win 38-13. I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer than that. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a nail biter, because usually these division games usually are. But similar to 2010, when the Patriots played the Jets, they lost the first time. And then Rex Ryan ran his mouth. And then second time, Bill just absolutely just shoved it down their throat. I think they won, 45-3
45, 40. I thought 42, but it could be 45.
42-3, something like that. They won by more than 30
Maybe
points.
45. And I remember he said 40-something points on the league's best defense, suck my dick. So,
yeah. So I think Bill might be something like that. And the Bills are rated as one of the best defenses in the NFL too. But I think we saw some holes where that's kind of an inflated stack going based on who some of their opponents have been this year.
Yep. Agreed. So thank you everyone.
I was just going to say one thing that sorry about that I think might also factor into it is I wonder how much of them having to travel on Christmas Day and play the day after Christmas, if that might throw them off a little bit too. But
yeah, that's a big one. It's not as bad as the people playing on Christmas. You basically lose both days. You lose Christmas Eve and Christmas because you travel on Christmas Eve. That's the thing that might impact them as well. It's kind of suck for their families, but it is what it is. So you get paid the big bucks. So thank you everyone for joining us again. Follow us on at Pat's 300 Level Pod. Subscribe, rate, and review. And hopefully we'll be discussing a Patriots victory next week. Hopefully. So this is a big key game for the season.
Yep.
Can impact the division. So
pretty much the winner of this game wins the division.
Exactly. So hopefully we're on top, but we'll find out. So hope you listen to us next week. Thanks.